Greetings from Peg Larson and John Call, who I think you want to stay and listen to after I'm done. He has some interesting things to say about this special session. It did start yesterday morning at 10 and it ended at 1:45. Fortunately for us, the education bill was the second bill out of the chute. And was not controversial. In fact, everybody seemed to like the fact that there was more money on education. The big hanger-up bill was the environment bill, which caused quite a ruckus. We passed 115 to 10 in the House and 53 to 12 in the Senate, which was actually very strong votes. It goes to the governor now. He says he will sign these bills. The education bill stayed in the form that he had agreed to with the other leaders, and $525 million was added to the cost of the education bill, and the formula went up to 2% and 2% from what had been 1% and 1.5% and 0.6 and 0.6. So that was really a really great thing, I think, that they decided to do that. I know some people wanted it to be higher, and that would have been great if they would have taken some money off the bottom, but that's what they negotiated and that's what they stuck to. One of the big deals in the bill actually was for career and technical. They kept in, as I said, that you can use an unlicensed teacher. However, you can't take it out of your levy, but I think with the increase in the formula of 2% and 2%, that will be very helpful in that area. But also they decided that career, technical, and agricultural credits can be used towards graduation, which is really quite a big thing. $17.5 million went to early learning scholarships. School readiness got $30.75 million. $10 million went to Head Start, and Head Start was not even in the original bill. $17 million went into Indian learning. It used to be Success for the Future, and now it's a different title. And I think a really good thing, especially for Rochester, is the ELL went to 7 years fully funded. And Senator Nelson had a few things that she really liked, and I'll read them to you. The scholarship program for pre-K, Reading Corps and Math Corps, the focus on early learning, the flexibility with the dollars at 2% and 2%, which is local control, and start before Labor Day this year only, but she would like to see that extended for good. The phase out of school property tax levy, and the resolution not adopted until voted on by the majority, and it really makes a lot of sense to do it that way. And those are the things that she said would help Rochester. We followed up on the scholarships targeted to the most risk kids, so the scholarships don't just go out there. They're actually, I don't want to say dedicated, but they're aimed at homeless kids, high-risk population, which I think is probably a really good idea, rather than just giving them to people who could afford to have their child go to preschool, and leaving out the people who cannot seems to make a big difference in the achievement gap. As far as the education bill goes, Senator Nelson voted yes, Senator Sengen voted no, and it did pass the Senate, as I said, 53 to 12. Special session is done. I don't believe there's any other work to be done. I know there were some bills hanging out there people wanted to bring up, but that was not in the agreement of the four leaders and the governor. And I think even though the governor tried to hold out for universal preschool, he actually gave in, and it still turned out to be a good bill. The $525 million is what was offered at the end of session, which is interesting because this is all could have been done then. And the Republicans turned that down. They thought it was too much, and that's what they ended up at the end. One of the other things that they did in the bill is they changed the testing requirements, and now it is more up to the school districts as to how many tests they perform. They must do the one from the education department, but the other ones are up to the school district how many times a year they actually want to test their students. And the other big part of the bill was teacher licensure, and they really made a lot of changes to how that can occur, and it's needed so that you can get early childhood teachers, so that you can get career and technical teachers if you can. And it also makes it easier for someone to come into the state and get their license. They were pretty hard on the Board of Teaching this session, but I guess they had given them directions last year to do things and it hadn't happened, and they've got a new executive director and things seem to be going well. She has a lot of changes to do, but I think they'll be for the best.
Well, one of the ugliest sessions in memory has come to an end. The remodeling of the Capitol was vexatious enough, but it was the process that really stunk this year. There was all kinds of significant policy changes that were put into bills without adequate hearing or with no hearings at all. Omnibus bills continue to grow in their scope and breadth, and those omnibus bills are put together really by committee chairs nowadays. Items are, after they're heard, are laid on the table for possible inclusion in the bill, and the chairman basically decides what will be in a bill and won't be in a bill, and then it appears before a committee. So there's never an up or down vote on items that are in an omnibus bill until the entire bill appears. That is not the way it was done in the past. That's something that's changed in the last 10 or 15 years and just has become more and more part of the process. Had this sort of lack of transparency occurred 20 years ago, the media would have been on top of it. There would have been a media firestorm. There would have been demands for more openness. Well, the media is crippled by budget cuts, and you just don't have the number of reporters on the scene that you used to have, and it just doesn't get covered. So the public really doesn't know about it. The only hope really is that the members of the legislature will rise up in protest against it. It is my hope that the friction caused by the erosion of the process this year will teach leaders in both parties, this is not a criticism of one party or the other, but will teach leaders in both parties that they need to return to a more transparent process. So I hope some lessons are learned that will be applied in the 2016 session. Speaking of 2016, at the beginning of the session there was talking about not even having a session or having a very, very short session with a very, very limited agenda. With the unfinished business of this session and the need to do a bonding bill and all the things that people are kind of unhappy about, I think that next session is going to be a rather short but very intense session with a much bigger agenda than anybody thought. So the next session will be intense, and education will be part of that intensity because the governor fully intends to come back next year and try to advance his agenda of pre-K education. So between March 8th and the constitutional deadline in about the third week of May, it's going to be very intense, and it's going to be important to get our ducks in line early so that we can hit the ground running in that session. Nobody seems terrifically happy about this session. The DFLers feel like their team went to the World Series and lost 4 straight. The Republicans, especially the more conservative elements, the Tea Party element in particular, are livid about the level of spending. They feel that the governor carried the day because the total in the end was much closer to what he wanted to spend than what they had intended to spend. So far I've stressed my frustrations, which I think most Minnesotans will share with what happened to the process this year. There are members in the Rochester delegation also who have been outspoken about what's happened in this process and have been troublemakers, which I applaud them for. And there's a higher degree of independence in our delegation than is found in other areas of the state, and we should all be thankful for that. And we should be thankful for the fact that our local legislators go to bat for us every year when it comes to our local schools. Anyway, I'd like to end on a cheerier note. The summer has begun, the session's over, we got 2%, and a number of things that were important to us, and let's celebrate that. And let's also demand more from our legislators next year when it comes to process. Thank you.